to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Freefall. Hey everyone, this is Andy Steele, and I'm back again for yet another show. We got another great one ahead of us. Iron Man 9/11 Truth activist Wayne Coste is back with 2 other great activists to talk about their latest outreach efforts to the Catholic community. We'll be getting to them very shortly. Now, if you're not familiar with this show, and this is the first time you've ever heard it, what we do is we talk about 9/11 science, 9/11 truth activism, and we feature people out there doing what they can to expose the biggest deception of our century, and perhaps even the biggest one of centuries past. That is, of course, the fact that we were lied to by our government and our corporate media about what destroyed the Twin Towers and Building 7 on September 11th, and that there's overwhelming scientific evidence that proves that those buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition on that horrible day. Now, this, of course, is a major crime, and it's not something that someone who is awake to it can simply get over and look past. So we come back week after week to shine a huge spotlight on this crime and to implore those in our audience who care about justice and care about the future of America to join us in this war of information. Now, a group at the forefront of this battle is Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. It is a nonprofit organization started by Richard Gage, AIA, laying the evidence out and doing everything it can to get justice for the victims of that day by educating the public. It is not motivated by a political agenda. It doesn't even point a finger at any party for placing the explosives in the buildings. It simply points out reality using standard science and calls for a real investigation into what destroyed the buildings. Now, currently, it represents over 1,700 verified architects and engineers, as well as thousands of other people who support them, all calling for this new investigation. It makes movies, it gives speeches, and it does various outreach actions to anyone whose ears are open to the truth, as you'll be hearing in this episode. So if you want to see what Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is about, go to AE911Truth.org, and you'll be able to keep up on the organization's latest efforts, and you will find a number of outreach efforts available to you there. All right, you can either participate in one of AE's numerous action alerts, like contacting your local police chief or sheriff with Richard Gage's letter to local law enforcement, which went out back on January the 16th. It's available there on the page for you to print out. Or you can join one of the volunteer teams. All right, no matter what your talent is, there is a place for you to make a difference and join what is this century's real war for freedom. All right, freedom to be intellectually honest and freedom from a lie that continues to plague our country. Again, that is AE911Truth.org. Check it out. Okay, I'm going to start this episode by briefly addressing something that AE911 Truth has already addressed on its page, and let me also get on record for this episode that I'm not AE spokesman, and the show, whether it be me speaking or the guest, does not officially represent the opinions or views of AE911 Truth. The show stands independently, and we voluntarily lend our support to AE's mission. But if you want to know what AE officially has to say about something, then you go to its webpage and read it for yourself. Now, that said, AE911 Truth was suddenly put in the national media spotlight this week, not because journalists had a mass revelation and realized that they should start doing their jobs by covering the evidence of controlled demolition of the towers on 9/11, but because of an incident where a woman in France apparently walked up to a world-famous painting of Lady Liberty leading soldiers in battle and added the word AE911 to it with a marker. All right, now, experts at restoring art, I guess, got the graffiti out pretty quickly, and the lady was arrested. And as of this recording, I haven't seen that her identity has been released yet. But AE911 Truth quickly released a statement saying, and I quote the statement, "We do not know if this act of vandalism was done in reference to our organization. Whether or not this is true, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth condemns and deplores the defacing of this priceless work of art and all public and private property. Our code of conduct requires all of our volunteers to abide by the laws, rules, and regulations of society." So there you go. AE911 Truth does not endorse what this lady did, and that's really it. The end. So while defacing an old picture that somebody determined is worth a ton of money is a crime, and the media has done a fine enough job of covering it, the crime we're going to continue to focus on here is the one that actually killed people. That being, of course, when someone somewhere made a decision to bring down the towers in a controlled demolition on people's heads and murder them. And, of course, when the officials tasked with investigating the crime covered it up. So we're going to keep our focus on that because those lives that were lost that day and, of course, in the wars that followed 9/11 are still way more priceless than any old picture ever will be. So with all that said, we're going to take our weekly 10 seconds of silence to remember those victims and all of the people in the future who will continue to die based on the 9/11 lie until the public and the establishment that enables this deception knows and accepts the truth. So we're going to take those 10 seconds of silence right now. All right, and that's 10 seconds. Again, folks, I and my guests don't come to the microphone every week to say the buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition because it's fun to make people mad and to challenge their worldview. All right, and in all honesty, it's not. But it is necessary because the people who perpetuated the crime, whoever they are likely still alive, still out there, and the ramifications of 9/11 continue to this day. Okay, before we get to our guests, some more quick 9/11 related news. If you go to AE911Truth.org, there's an article there titled Salon and Slate Magazines Confused Over 9/11 Facts. Now, the article is originally from digitaljournal.com. It talks about how Salon magazine published an article expressing sympathy for the 9/11 Truth movement, and what it said in the article was this. It said, unlike with Sandy Hook, 9/11 conspiracy theories flow from a scientific fact. Whatever the 9/11 Commission report might claim, fire generated by burning jet fuel is not hot enough to melt steel. And, of course, that's true. But the wheels quickly turned and some emotional psyoped readers got upset, and Salon pulled the article. And then sort of like a big brother voice from the sky in some dystopian movie, you know, after giving the original article and its author the hook from the stage, Salon put out this fearful, indignant apology and carefully crafted the right words to assure whoever they were trying to impress that its marriage with the lie was as happy and as joy-filled as ever. So here's what the Salon wrote afterwards. It wrote, on January 22nd, Salon republished an article from one of our content partners, the Weaklings. So they're basically saying, it wasn't us, folks, it was them, get them. That was sympathetic to unfounded 9/11 conspiracy theories. So they have to make sure they drive home the official PC opinion by getting that word unfounded in there. The article slipped through our usual review process and was clearly not up to our standards. We removed it as soon as it was brought to our attention by readers. Salon has a long history of debunking fringe conspiracies around September 11th and more recently Sandy Hook, and are proud of those efforts. We regret this oversight. So yes, they regret their moment of intellectual honesty, and they're assuring the system that it will never happen again. And then apparently some writer named Jeremy Stahl at Slate magazine wrote about the whole thing. And this is what he wrote. In 2011, I wrote a history of 9/11 conspiracy movement for Slate. And I can tell you that, no, this is not scientific fact, nor any other kind of fact. Salon feels the same way and has since pulled the article from its site. So apparently the Stahl guy is the definitive voice of what's scientific fact, except that he's not. He's just some guy with an opinion writing for Slate. He's not even accurate, and Digital Journal points out in its article, burning jet fuel does not generate enough heat to melt steel. Jet fuel burns at 800 degrees to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel melts at 2,750 degrees Fahrenheit. No government report has ever made the claim that jet fuel can melt steel. And the article also points out that the 9/11 Commission report did not investigate the causes of the collapses of the towers. It was actually NIST, that was the government organization that pretended to do that. And contrary to what is portrayed in the Salon and Slate articles, 9/11 Truth activists claim that what the government failed to explain is how the undamaged parts of the buildings, which were not hit by planes and did not burn, were then destroyed so rapidly and completely by the falling debris. Now, Digital Journal in its article cites 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out, which discusses many of the facts that were not investigated by NIST. So you can watch experts speak out for free on the net, folks, or buy copies in bulk and give them to your friends by going to the AE911 Truth store. All right, I just gave away one of my last copies this week. I myself need to get some more of them too. And now finally, and I mentioned this last week, ladies and gentlemen, a movie you need to see is Operation Terror. All right, it's a fictionalized Hollywood drama about the hypothetical events involved in the planning of the 9/11 crime. So we're going to be getting Art Olivier, who wrote that movie, on the show as soon as we can to talk about it in more depth. But if you want to reach people who need, or the kind of people who need mood music and scripted drama to pay attention to the real nature of the 9/11 crime, then this is the movie to do it with. And from what I see, it's not meant to be the definitive explanation of what really happened on 9/11. It's just meant to get people talking, to get those who may have never questioned 9/11 before to look at it from a different angle. Now, from there, they can do the research of what happened in the real world on their own and draw their own conclusions. So to watch a trailer of the movie and learn more about it, you just go to OperationTerror.com. You can also buy a copy of it there for the standard price of your average DVD. It's definitely worth the money since theaters are afraid of airing this film, all right? So you need to be the distributor yourself and screen it at your local library or your local cultural center. And you can define cultural center however you want. As well, you need to air movies like Experts Speak Out and Blueprint for Truth, too. All right, this is the nature of the information war, people. When the establishment doesn't do something, you take the bull by the horns and you do it yourself. All right, you do it for your country, you do it for your children, because really the future depends on fully exposing this lie. All right, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has reached out to a variety of religious groups with the 9/11 evidence over the last few years, and members of several AE911 Truth Action Groups continued that outreach effort recently by attending Justice Rising, the 2012 Call to Action conference that is intended for the progressive Catholic community. 5 volunteers came together as exhibitors and workshop leaders to talk about the events at the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. As the article about AE911Truth.org states, the message was an eye-opener to many who stopped by to talk. 3 of those people are here today to talk about that outreach effort. The first one is Mike Cook. Mike was born and raised in northern Kentucky and is currently living there again. He spent more than 20 years roaming extensively around the western states, mostly employed in construction. He is now working as a union carpenter, frequently building bridges. He is an experienced climber and river guide, employed for a number of years with the National Outdoor Leadership School and Outward Bound. He has also worked as a wilderness therapist and adjudicated youth wilderness therapy courses and trained Army Rangers in rock climbing. That's quite an impressive resume. He taught special ed in the public schools for a few years. He's an artist, a musician, a writer, and a certified EMT. And he's also been a volunteer with AE911 Truth since 2008. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thank you, Andy. Thanks for doing the show, and thanks for having us on.
Our second guest is Tom Spellman. Tom has an undergraduate degree in architecture, and he was a property manager and is a community and peace activist and was a conscientious objector and did alternative service during the Vietnam War. Though he speaks for himself tonight, as do all of our guests, he is on the board of AE911 Truth. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this good work.
And our final guest is Wayne Coste. He's an electrical engineer who volunteers for AE911 Truth. He's the congressional outreach team leader, and he's the guy who led the effort to expose Netroots Nation, basically excluding AE911 Truth from its conference last year, mainly because telling the truth about 9/11 made its political channels kind of nervous. Now, we had him on once to talk about that, and then a second time to talk about his outreach to civil liberty activists at another conference. Wayne, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having us on.
I want to thank you guys because the work you're doing is really what is going to help expose this lie. Getting out there, meeting the people, and talking one-on-one with them. I think that is the best kind of interaction that anybody can do. The basic conversations can go even farther many times than just watching a video. Now, Mike and Tom, since for each of you this is your first appearance on 9/11 Freefall, can you tell us briefly how you woke up to the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence and what prompted you guys to take action? And let's start with Mike.
All right, thanks. Well, I knew when I watched it happen live on TV that the buildings were destroyed by explosive controlled demolition. I've been working with steel and concrete for a long time, and there's just no other way that it could happen like that and not have the explosives involved. And early on, all of the media were widely reporting the explosions. It took me maybe a week or a little more to come to grips with the fact that it was, quote unquote, an inside job. And what brought me to that was I was watching very closely the reports on the stock trades, often called the put options. And I realized that the perpetrators had made a big mistake when they bet on the stock market like that, because it'd be very easy to trace, and it was really obvious. I kept waiting for arrests, and there were no reports of arrests. And when they stopped reporting on the stock trades, and they had been talking about it daily, and when they stopped talking about it, that was when I said, uh-oh.
Amazing. Now, Tom.
Well, for me, basically, it was about a year and a half in the spring of 2003. I mean, it looked funny, but I surely didn't think about it. You're busy with your life. You're dealing with other things. We had just moved to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And so all of this, there was a fair amount of commentary in the mainstream press as well as on websites about what happened at the Pentagon. And there was some discussion about that, and I thought, well, gee whiz, this is a 50-foot-high building, 5 stories high. We should surely be able to figure out what happened. So I made a little scale model and of what happened, and got the American Society of Civil Engineers. By that time, they had produced their first book about the destruction of the columns and how the building had held up, which is something that they often do after a major building collapse. So it's a standard operating procedure for them. In this case, the FBI had redacted some of the photos of some of the columns, but per the FBI, they left other photos of those same columns, so you could see exactly what happened to all of them. And at the end of that, I was sure that the official story wasn't true, wasn't sure what happened at the Pentagon, but was also positive that anybody who talked about explosives in the buildings were pretty much crazy and trying to undo the 9/11 movement. And then Dr. Stephen Jones, about a year after that point in time, came out and made the very simple statement, random fires, random damage can never produce a symmetrical event. If you're a scientist, it's all over. It is all over after that statement. And the fact of the silence that goes on to this day is the thing I wake up every morning scratching my head about. How is it possible that when a statement that is that simple totally destroys and exposes the lie and destroys their whole argument, goes on and on and on?
Well, I completely agree with you, and that goes to show why that work by Stephen Jones is so important. I don't know who the first person to come out and start talking about controlled demolition was on the towers, but that goes to show not only is it important to be a leader and speak out for yourself, but it's also important to be the first follower, too, to give credence to the leader and prompt others to start listening and taking action as well. So I want to compliment you for recognizing that and taking that step, Tom. Now, on last week's episode, when I had a panel discussion among other activists from AE911Truth, we talked about outreach to different groups of people of varying causes. Now, you guys just did this outreach with the Catholic group. Now, whose idea was it to reach out to this Catholic group, and what did you hope to accomplish in targeting this particular group?
Well, I think it's fair to say that basically call to action always was in Milwaukee. I live in Lake Geneva. We're 60 miles away. I lived in Milwaukee my whole life. And for personal reasons, never was able to make it to the conference there. But lo and behold, it worked this year. The conference date was changed a little bit, and so I said, let's go. And so rented the space and found no resistance at all from the group in terms of renting the space or any of the of those kinds of, preparatory kinds of actions. So the group was very, very open. And basically, again, just simply to be there, to witness to the truth, and to explain to people what's going on.
What, because it mentions in the article about past religious outreach that AE has done, and anybody feel free to answer this, who knows, but what religious outreach has AE done in the past?
Well, this is Mike. Last year, Richard spoke before the Nation of Islam, and that was a very controversial move. There was nearly a mutiny within the organization. A lot of folks were against it, and some folks were for it. My philosophy is everybody needs to know this. Everybody, and we shouldn't draw any lines. We shouldn't leave anybody out. We don't care. We don't get into any sort of arguments that other people may have about anything. The only thing we're concerned about is the physical, forensic, scientific evidence for controlled demolition at the World Trade Center. And I think it's a religious issue, a spiritual issue. This is very deep and dark, and we've all been deceived very badly, or most everybody has been deceived very badly. And there's now groups, religious leaders for 9/11 Truth, Christians for 9/11 Truth, Muslims for 9/11 Truth. I believe there's a Jewish group also. So you can look these folks up online. It was a chance to reach a very large audience of people who are already motivated and active. The Minister Farrakhan organized that first Million Man March. He was one of the key central figures in that. A million people descended on D.C. And I see them out in the street, occasionally. I'm out there, and they hand me their stuff, and we can talk and stuff. So, those are the kinds of people we want to reach out to, those who are already sticking their necks out a little bit and doing something, not just sitting on their butts and watching the world happen around them, watching it fall apart, really. So that was a religious outreach. It was very controversial. I'm really glad we went through it. There was basically no negative repercussions at all that I'm aware of, and I hope that this helps alleviate some fears that people have. We have a sincere desire to maintain our credibility. It's largely based on the professional signers to the petition, over 1,700 now. We'll be at 2,000 before long, and that's great. But everybody needs to know this information, and it doesn't matter if they purport whatever. Everybody needs to know.
Okay. I agree with you, and I just want to add to, because I was in that debate that was getting batted around about whether or not that should be done. And what I like about reaching out to any group, and obviously I think there's some limits. You don't want to reach out to an extreme example that we would never even consider is something like neo-Nazis or something like that. But beyond an extreme example, I don't really think there's any segment of society that we should not be reaching out to. That's my opinion, and especially with like the Nation of Islam or very deep-rooted groups that have a history of their own outreach. They're very organized. If you can wake up groups like this that already have this infrastructure in place to get their own message out, if they want to tag on the AE911Truth controlled demolition evidence along with that, great guns, let them go ahead and do that. So that's the real genius of reaching out. Did somebody else have something to say?
Yeah, well, this is Wayne, and I want to kind of build on what Mike had said, is that it's important to reach out to all these different groups. But putting this a little in a little different context, the history of architects and engineers who we were representing was that they were reaching out to the technical and building professionals for the most part in the early years, and the action groups that were formed by architects and engineers would go out to different organizations and give talks in different venues. The presenters team tried to reach out to local communities and found that many of them that were receptive were a number of church groups, and in particular the progressive, what we call progressive religious communities were really the most receptive, and that the folks who were at the call to action were a good example of them. The Unitarian Universalists, many of our speakers have had good success in talking with them, and as a matter of fact, this June I'm going to be leading an effort to go to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, which is also going to be in Louisville, and have a presence there. But as the organization has kind of been pushing on the architects and engineers, the technical side. This other side has evolved where we're trying to reach out to many different types of communities, which includes the Nation of Islam. Tom Spellman had come up with the suggestion that this would be a really good venue for that, and was able to secure it. And when people heard this, they said, "Oh, of course, that makes a lot of sense." We were really pleased that they were so receptive to it. So, and put it in the context of our outreach, we're now going after many other segments of society, and as Mike, I think it was Mike pointed out, David Ray Griffin has been leading the charge as far as the theological benefits of reaching these groups, and talking about speaking truth as a spiritual practice.
You're totally right, and no, I mean, great point there. And it goes to show just how unifying this issue is. And Dave Schlesinger said last week when we were talking about this, he marveled over the fact that this issue, unlike pretty much any other, unifies the left and the right, because it's the truth. I mean, it's a mass murder, and we're all good people, and regardless of where your political leaning is or where your religious leaning is, most people are good people and want to get along, and we can't stomach, once you wake up to this, the fact that forces were able to get away with perpetuating this crime and continue to do it. So you become a rabid activist until justice is sought. But the fact that we were able to reach out to the Nation of Islam, that we're reaching out to the Catholics, and there are people receptive to this message from every facet of society, goes to show just how relevant this issue is. Even though the media tries to dismiss us and write this off as a fringe group, write us off as a fringe group. Well, it's not a fringe when it encompasses every segment of society, okay? Because at the basis of many religions is, their truth, their own version of it. But I think there's a line from the Bible that the truth will set you free. And in this case, in America, the truth will set us free from this lie and from everything that's taking place right now.
Yeah, I did not mention David Ray Griffin, but I certainly should have. His book on this particular topic is Christian Faith and 911Truth, or 911Truth and Christian Faith, one or the other. And, if there's anybody I can point to in the 9/11 movement as being like sort of without sin, it would be him. He's just done tremendous work. He's written, I think, 11, 12 books on the subject.
Well, David Ray Griffin, just about every other guest I get on here mentions him, so eventually I'm going to have to get him on the show. It's going to be a very highly anticipated episode when I finally accomplish that. Now let's talk a little bit more about this event here. It's called Call to Action. You guys have talked a little bit about what it's about, but you said it's progressive Catholics. What does that mean, and what do they focus on at this event?
Well, primarily the social justice. The organization's been around for 30 or 40 years, and basically it was started up shortly after Vatican II, which was the major change in moving away from Latin and going to the language of the people, was the main thing, the main change that really opened everybody's eyes. But this group was basically looking at social justice, and so the speakers and at the event, it's a liturgical event, but it's also talking about social justice. So a gentleman was there from California, Los Angeles, who works with gang members, and some people were there talking about clean water, and then obviously the different religious orders and their social justice work in Central and South America and all around the world. So that's the basis for the group of people. And again, but most of these people are not aware. This is what the government said. You count on institutions, and one of the institutions is universities. The main institution is the press. Freedom of the press. Why was that so important? Because the press is supposed to tell the truth. The universities are supposed to tell the truth. our justice system. What is the oath? You swear to tell the truth, or you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so that's what's so fascinating about all of this, is where did it all go to? How did the press fail this miserably is the only way to do it.
Well, it's not even a question of just failing on one day. It's a continuous failure, and it's in my opinion, and very well studied and well educated opinion, it's a deliberate failure. It's a combination of an agenda to keep it covered, and it's also mixed in there people's personal ambitions and fear of rocking the boat. People may want to cover it, but they've worked hard to get to where they are. They want to be the star. They want to have their name in the print, and they don't want to embrace the real nature of journalism, which is to get to the truth and be the fourth branch of government, keeping the constitutional government in check.
Right.
And as we saw with the Salon and Slate articles, I believe there are good people in the media who are well aware of the story and want to get it out, but their hands are tied, and as soon as they do put something up, they issue a retraction. There's an awful lot of control. It doesn't take too many bad apples at the very top to try to keep a lid on this. They're struggling. They're really struggling because it does just keep breaking through all the time.
Well, and it's because of activists like you and in shows like this one, because we are not giving up, and we still have freedom of speech, at least on the internet, but we're getting out there. But just how strange is it that we have to comb our hair and shine our shoes and beg and plead for people to pay attention to what is obvious and right in front of their faces? And again, we're supported by victims' family members, and there's a lot of people around the world that are calling into question the official story of 9/11 and what brought down the towers. And as Dave Schlesinger said last week, how does a smaller top part of a building crush a lower part of a building without slowing down? It's basic common sense stuff like this that has totally been ignored by this media. And yes, people will study entire classes about this time of American history and what happened to our society to keep hush on this.
Yeah. So it's Andy.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah. So I want to get back to a little bit about the Catholic mindset. One of the things that we had going into this program was a little booklet put out by Emmanuel Charles McCarthy, who's involved with the Christian Center for Nonviolence. And in it, I think it does a very good job of the article is called The 10th Anniversary of the War by Deceit, and it talks about the kind of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and how they were all resulted from a lot of deceit that we've just talked about. But the introduction to that is a quote from John Paul II. And so I just want to kind of read you what it says, just to give you a sense of the religious perspective that should be brought out even more in what we're trying to work on. It says, all human beings desire to know, and truth is the proper objective of that desire. While each must be respected in his or her search for the truth, there exists a primordial moral obligation to seek the truth and to adhere to it once it is found. People cannot be generally indifferent to the question of whether what they know is true or not. One may define a human being as one who seeks truth. The thirst for truth is so deeply rooted in the human heart that to be obligated to ignore it would cast existence into jeopardy. So that's a quote from John Paul II, and speaks a lot to not just the search for a spiritual grounding, but also the truth in many aspects of relationships. So this conference, this is something that would resonate really, really strongly with most of the people who attended it.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I look into, I always try to analyze the meaning, and I'm not a particularly religious person in the sense that I subscribe to any particular religion. I look at everything, and I think about this from Michael Moore's movie Fahrenheit 9/11, and I've been out there in the internets and in my writing, and I've criticized Michael Moore on some of his economic stuff personally, but I agree with him completely on the foreign policy stuff, and I thought Fahrenheit 9/11 was good, except it didn't go deep enough, obviously. But there was something he said, and I'm paraphrasing, and I don't want to put the words in his mouth, but he said something to the extent that when a government lies, it trickles down, and it trickles down into the military, and people do bad things. And so what we've got now is we've got a big lie that is being covered up, and that is trickling into the rest of society. It's soldiers trying to justify their service overseas, justify the wars that they were a part of, why they lost their, had their legs blown off. It can't be because of this large deception, and so they're going to rabidly defend the lie, even though the evidence proves otherwise. And so this has further divided our society, and we see our society tearing itself apart. And I look at this as a religious or a spiritual war, too, because, the war for truth is a spiritual, too. And, it's like this big secret that we are kept under the floorboards and nobody wants to acknowledge, but it goes back to that line, I guess. The truth will set you free, and for some people, some people are being freed quicker than others, but we need to do it quicker.
Just kind of following up on that, this booklet again that we handed out, hundreds of copies of it, has in there a quote from Jeremiah. It says, this is Jeremiah 9:4-7. Each one deceives the other. No one speaks the truth. They have accustomed their tongues to lying. A murderous arrow is their tongue. It speaks deceitfully. With his mouth, each speaks peace to his neighbor, but in his heart he lays an ambush for him. And so, then the essay by Emmanuel Charles McCarthy goes on to talk about other stuff, but that really describes so much of what happens when you start telling the truth. Is it just builds on each other.
Now, you guys went to this thing. I want to hear from you, and each of you feel free to chime in and tell your own personal experiences. But what was the reaction to you guys at this thing? Tell us some personal stories about some interactions you had.
Well, for myself, many people didn't know, so they would listen attentively. They were thoughtful. They were respectful. They freely took the literature. There was one person, he stopped quite a distance away, probably 15 feet away, and he made a comment, and he marched off in a distance, and before I could talk to him, he made a second comment. I don't remember the comments anymore, but the third one I remember real well. He says, "I teach at a university," as he stormed off, never talking to us, never scratching his head. And there are absolute proofs with this. One of them is the powder. People call it dust, and that's what it was originally called. But all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I said, that's not dust. Dust is the stuff on the piano, for Pete's sakes. That's freshly made powder. And all of it in 15 seconds. Mechanically, how do you make powder? You make it with a mortar and a pestle. You grind it. There aren't any mechanical mechanisms there to make the powder. So, any materials engineer, Thomas Eager, the first person to write a story about this, was a materials engineer at MIT. This is all ludicrous. And then you have Chandler's stuff around free fall, which is an absolute proof, and then you have Jones's comment on the symmetrical collapse of 7, which is also an absolute proof. So here are 3 absolute proofs. And there are many others besides all of that. So,
well, and it might have been Richard Gage. I don't know where I heard this quote, but I think it was Richard Gage who, in one of the AE's movies, said, quoted Sherlock Holmes that said, "When you eliminate the impossible, then whatever is left, no matter how improbable, is the answer." Right. And what I always hear from people, and I talk to people, and I talk friendly with them. I don't get in big screaming matches with people, like some do. But we talk about this, and I'll bring up these points that AE911Truth brings to the table, and the only answers that I hear from people is, well, I just can't believe that they would do that, and it's all of these things that are completely irrelevant to the facts of the scientific evidence, and that's what you run into a lot, in a lot of places. But it's a tremendous obstacle to overcome. Logically, it shouldn't be. Logically, if everybody was like Spock here and just looked at the facts and looked at everything like a big logic puzzle, then we wouldn't be needing to do this show right now. This would be over in the history books, and the perpetrators would be in jail. But unfortunately, it is the emotional aspect that we have to overcome, and it's a big wall to overcome, and we're still fighting it.
Yeah. I got to give all the credit to this outreach effort to Wayne and Tom, or Tom and Wayne. I don't know who's deserves first billing there, but it was their deal. I was able to go to it because it was close to my house at a time when I was free, and I was really glad I had the opportunity. Completely unscientific poll, but I would guess about 5% were aware already. About 5% were, as Tom's example gave, completely closed off to any sort of information, and like the other 90% we reached. I really wish that I had a camera to record some of the expressions on some of the faces as people took this in. It would have been really good to put in the article. I kicked myself for not bringing a camera because, people's jaws were on the floor, their eyes were wide open, and they were going, oh, my God. Since Wayne gave a couple of quotes, I'd like to give a couple. These are a couple of my favorites. This one is disputed whether or not it's actually from Lincoln, but he said, I'm a firm believer in the people. Given the truth, the people can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts. And then the other one is from Jefferson. It's not disputed, where it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without government. I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. So the media not doing their job is a very big part of this. The government can lie, and the media is supposed to be there to catch them, and they're not doing their job.
Well, again, it's the media should be the fourth branch of government, the great check and balance of our republic, and if the media has become self-censoring and fearful, then so goes America in itself. And so it is a struggle. And when, the information war is that. It's a struggle for the control of the nation because, again, if the media suddenly was on our side and suddenly had a mass revelation and started doing its job, this problem would be over yesterday. Now, I want to ask you guys, the church leadership, like people like priests and all of that, who may not have necessarily been awake before the controlled demolition evidence, what kind of reaction did you get from that specific group?
I wouldn't say that there were, because of certain politics inside the church, especially about women priests and women saying Mass, and Call to Action had a liturgy which wasn't a Mass, but had women in leadership roles at it, so not a lot of priests were there. But we have, I know, have a few personal friends, and they're very cautious that they basically are much like other mainstream people, and sort of choose to not get involved. Unfortunately, they really don't see their role as being a leadership role in this case, and so outside of Father Charles McCarthy, few of them, actually some of them are gatekeepers on the other side, and unfortunately not a great deal of leadership there.
And, that's too bad because historically churches have played a big role in bringing about social change, not just in America, but all over the world. Now, with that said, and, I'm going to ask anybody who has the answer to this because I honestly don't know, but, what role has the Catholic Church, or any church for that matter, played in the 9/11 Truth movement so far?
Well, this is Wayne, and I'll point out that not very many churches have done very much, and I think I'm I may be on skating on thin ice here, but I don't think it's the churches that are the result bring out the social change. I think what happens is the people understand this, and they have to build the platforms for the leadership to then step out onto, and because leaders are very timid, especially if you're counting on donations from the congregations. They're just not willing to go out too far. There are many people who've I think tried. There are religious leaders for 911Truth, and I don't have the list of them here, but that might be an interesting thing to pursue. But the leadership doesn't usually lead. They have to be many times pushed, and so I view much of my outreach as trying to build a safe space for them to move a little further from where they had been. So that's what I try to do.
Well, you're right about that. That's a great point to make, and maybe I'm going to correct myself there. When I talk about the churches are made up of people, and I guess it all boils down to the people. When the people change, the leader will come. I guess the expression goes. And there's something
when the people lead, the leaders follow.
There you go. But it's something very telling in what you said, Wayne, and I don't even know if you meant to be this profound, but it's really blowing me away right now. But it's, as how fearful the leaders are. Well, why are we calling them leaders then? I mean, and maybe this is just a product of when something becomes too big. I remember this, and this isn't about church, but I remember during the election, this is before I was awake to anything. I was just a stupid college kid. I didn't care about nothing, but I was watching the election. This is the 2000 election, and it was this picture, this video image of Alan Tipper dancing on this little raised platform, and they're the only ones in tuxedos, mind you, and all these journalists are around him snapping pictures, and it just looks so phony and so scripted that it's almost like I had this epiphany that to ascend to quote-unquote leadership in this country, you have to strip away anything that makes you an actual leader. Because, in my opinion, a real leader is a person that will go their own path regardless of whether or not other people follow him. If he's true and correct, people will follow him. That's a real leader, but we don't really have that when you go to the top of an organization. And I guess you just reminded me of that, Wayne. Now, if you're, there are people listening to this program right now who may have even picked out this particular episode because of the content we're talking about. What would you guys say to Catholics or anybody out there who is a 9/11 Truth activist and they're active in their church also, who want their church to become involved in this fight? What would you advise them to do to try to get their church involved in some way? What steps can they take?
Mike here. I would, especially people in the mega churches with the big screens and the huge audiences and all, you need to get to the leadership. You really do. You have to get them convinced that this is the truth, and they need to then help their congregation kind of gird their loins that we're going to take you on a wild ride here and show experts speak out. And I think that's pretty much all you have to do. It'll take off from there.
Well, and I was thinking about this while you were talking. How would I answer? And I'm coming up with this on the spot here. But I remember when I was a kid, and I was raised Catholic. They had church bulletins and things like that. I mean, what do you think the likelihood of success rate? And maybe it just depends on each individual priest. But what do you think the success rate would be if somebody wanted to get an AE911Truth information into their church bulletin or something, maybe even into the sermon or an announcement at the beginning of the Mass or something?
No. Basically, being able to show AE911Truth, the Expert Speak Out video is probably the single best thing that people can try to do wherever it is, community organization, wherever. If people are listening, get a copy of it and just begin showing it to people. And this is a real grassroots. Basically, the foundation will be very, very sound when the top begins to topple on this one. And it's a broad issue that brings both the left and the right together on it. So I think that is really the critical thing as far as bulletins or anything. That's not going to go anyplace, because will all be seen as an affront, and people who are true official story folks will really raise Cain, and no priest will, especially with the church, the Catholic Church in particular, in the shape it's in right now. It really has lost any moral leadership that it ever had, and it surely in the 60s and the 70s against the war and against racial injustice were major players in that area, but now have lost a lot of that credibility.
Well, and I guess it boils down to any kind of group, whether it be in a church group or it be in some fancy, cosmopolitan cafe among, liberals or something. It really just depends on people being unafraid of funny looks, being unafraid of the mass peer pressure, and just saying, hey, I watched this movie the other day, and it was the third building that fell on 9/11 at 5:20, and you watch this thing, it's almost like it's sunk into the ground. It just fell like a controlled demolition, and they had explosives in those buildings. You need to watch it, and you need to be vocal about it. You need to have loud conversations about it and be unapologetic, and it's amazing how many people, even if, regardless of what they're thinking, they will be afraid to speak out, because that's the nature of the people that defend the lie. They don't really know much about the information, and when you come across as knowing what you're talking about and you speak confidently, people will listen, even if at first they're skeptical. You may prompt them to investigate it further, and that goes for any group that you're talking to, again, whether it be the church group or it be your football team or whatever. So I guess it all boils down to the same thing.
That's right.
I think that Tom and I are both right. It is grassroots, but it's also leadership. I think it's helpful to look at things from the other side. What does the other side do? They assassinate Martin Luther King. He's the leader. And the civil rights movement didn't die, but it suffered a real serious setback at that point. And so if you can reach those leaders, that's a trick. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But if we can get some religious leaders that are willing to go before their congregation and, come hell or high water, I know I'm standing on the truth, so God is with me, and I'll take whatever comes. If I get kicked out of here, so be it. But I'm going to do what I know is right. That's the kind of commitment we need. Thank you.
You're right, and it's funny too. You just because, even if you can't get your church, and I'm saying this to the audience out there, even if you can't get your church to do a screening of 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out, if you have friends in the church, people you see all the time, they may come to your parties on your anniversary or come and hang out every once in a while. That doesn't mean you can't farm that group for open minds and have them do a screening at your house. It's a potential. It's a bag to grab from for potential. Awaken people who are awakened and could be future activists for this topic, and that does not just apply to the church, but any group that you deal with on a weekly or day-to-day basis. Now, what is the future of AE911Truth's religious outreach? Do you guys have any other things planned or know of any other projects in this area that AE911Truth is considering?
Yeah, this is Wayne. So let me just reiterate that we're planning on going down to Louisville again because the Unitarian Universalist Society is having its General Assembly, and that's going to be June 19th through the 23rd. And as part of that, we're going to be doing an outreach to the community there and do a screening at the we're envisioning it being at the Muhammad Ali Center, because Muhammad Ali was from Louisville, and there's quite a bit of history there related to his time. And in fact, in one of the the display cases, there is a statement by Muhammad Ali about 9/11, and again, if you'll pardon me, I'll read it to you here. It says, I am a Muslim. I'm an American. As an American Muslim, I want to express my deep sadness and anguish at the tremendous loss of life that occurred on Tuesday. Islam is a religion of peace. Islam does not promote terrorism or the killing of people. I cannot sit by and let the world think that Islam is a killing religion. It hurts me to see what radical people are doing in the name of Islam. These radicals are doing things that God is against. Muslims do not believe in violence. If the culprits are Muslim, they have twisted the teaching of Islam. Whoever performed or is behind the terrorist attacks in the United States of America does not represent Islam. God is not behind assassins. Anyone involved in this must pay for their evil. I pray that God blesses the people and the families of those who were killed and our great country. That was Muhammad Ali, public statement, September 16th, 2001. So we're going to be going down to another religious community, one that is very much historically steeped in activism and
science
and science and logic. And we'll be trying to do outreach to them. And I expect that we'll probably see something similar to the results, probably a bit more people familiar with the evidence. I would have said that 20% of the people were fully with us at the call to action group. Another 20% were pretty much aware, but not kind of with us. Not quite that far, and about 60% were just uninformed, completely uninformed. So, and then there's only a small percentage, and I would have put that at 5%, of people who were just abhorrent of us being there and saying these things. And so that was a really small percentage, but they were really obvious, because you give them something and they realize once you realize what it is you were saying, they would actually then give you the materials back and walk away really quick.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. It's amazing. I love the surveys that you do, because that really is what how you can measure results. So that's going to be in June. You guys are doing that. Remind us around that time. We can tell our audience about that, and anybody who wants to come out and support what you guys are doing can do that. We are actually out of time on this show. I want to thank you guys for coming on here and talking about your outreach and doing your outreach. And as Bernie Suarez always said, your work will live on even after you're gone. Your work will remain and be there for future generations. Well, folks, again, we are out of time. Remember, you can listen to us every Thursday night at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. This is Andy Steele saying good night, goodbye, and have a great week.